Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this re-recording of the webinar session from the 26th of March 2020. My name is Jamie Kaminsky, and I'm the Head of Training for the CEF eArchiving building block. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second of our training webinars. In terms of what we're going to do today, I will give you a brief outline of the Connecting Europe facility, or CEF for short, and the CEF building blocks, and then I'll talk more specifically about the eArchiving building block. This should take about 15 minutes, and then I'll hand over to Bjorn Skog and Andreas Skegerberg, who will be delivering the training on ESSArch today. Next slide, please. So, as I said, I'm going to start with a very quick overview of the CEF program and the building blocks, for those of you who may not be familiar with these instruments. So the Connecting Europe Facility, or CEF, is a financing program. It finances infrastructure in the areas of transport, energy and telecoms, and it's the EU's largest financing instrument for cross-border connectivity. These different areas are governed by EU regulation that define the scope of support. So, for example, for CEF Telecom, there are the CEF Telecom guidelines which cover the general and strategic objectives of the programme. These include principles such as supporting mature IT solutions that can be used in a cross-border context. There are also annual work programmes that are published on the Commission's website which define the activities that will take place in any specific year. Now, the CEF programme runs from 2014 to 2020. So we're right at the end of the current programme and moving towards the next, which is the Digital Europe programme. And that will be the EU's largest ever financing programme for digital connectivity. Next slide, please. One of the most important elements for the CEF programme, or CEF Telecoms programme, are the building blocks. And these are reusable modular solutions that enable key digital services. So, for example, eID allows citizens to connect to public services using their national electronic ID from a member state. So a Belgian living in Spain could access local government services using eID and vice versa. E-delivery supports secure cross-border data exchange using the AS4 message exchange protocol. The key thing about these building blocks is that they promote standards. So at the core of any one building block, you have a constituent standard or group of standards and specifications which may be defined by EU legislation. The building blocks support the implementation of these standards by first providing the standards and then offering a range of supporting services. So of the building blocks that you can see on this screen, we've got eID, e-delivery and e-signature, and they support the implementation of the eIDA regulation on authentication and trust services in the internal marketing. E-invoicing supports the implementation of the European standard on e-invoicing, which was mandated in the directive on e-invoicing and public procurement. Context broker, the big data test infrastructure, and e-archiving are components of the data value chain. So how do you use and deploy data sets and services, smart services, and long-term accessibility? And finally, we have e-translation, which supports multilingual cross-border public services through the use, in this case, of an API. Next slide, please. So a building block contains sample software based on the standards or specifications of that particular building block. There can be access to training and conformance testing services to ensure that the standards contained within a building block have been correctly applied. Next slide, please. In terms of how to use a building block, broadly speaking, you can take the core constituent standards and build a software solution yourself, or you can purchase compliance solutions from the marketplace, or you can reuse sample software provided by the Commission. Obviously, this is dependent on the specific building block that you're considering implementing, but that's the general model. Next slide, please. So today we'll focus on one specific building block, and that's the eArchiving building block. I'll just say a few words about the eArchiving building block because I'm sure a few of you are wondering what exactly this building block does. Next slide, please. So the eArchiving building block was created in late 2018, and it provides a set of specifications and tools for transmitting, describing, and preserving digital data, all of which can be found on the building block website. And you can see the link on the screen now. We talked earlier about each building block having a core standard or specifications. Well, in the case of eArchiving, the core specification is the CSIP, the Common Specification for Information Packages. We ran an introductory session on CSIP last month, which you can download from the CEF training website. Next slide, please. So the building block provides a variety of services. So we maintain the technical specifications like the Common Specification for Information Packages. We provide open source tools that you can download and use right away. We have compliance and validation services that ensure that specifications are followed. We have a service desk. We're also developing a training offering, of which this webinar is a part. And we have outreach and community engagement activities. And all of this revolves around data preservation, reuse, migration, and trust. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is part of the Building Blocks training offer, and our training is based on actual user requirements. We pride ourselves on listening to the community, and one of the most important tools that we use to understand the community's needs is our user needs survey. Next slide, please. So if you're listening today and you've not completed this survey, then please have a look, and if you can, fill it in. For us, this isn't just some kind of tick box exercise. It's actually a critical tool for understanding the training that the community actually needs and what we need to do to accommodate that need. From your perspective, it gives you an opportunity to actually influence the kind of training that we provide. So it is really important. Next slide, please. So the core training will be delivered in the form of webinars like this, video training, and training modules in the Moodle learning platform. And the content will include things like the core specifications, CSIP, key content type information, specifications like those for database and geospatial data, validation and compliance, end-to-end eArchiving systems like Rhoda and ESSArch, and data preservation tools. So there's a lot to look forward to over the coming months and years. Next slide, please. So our webinars are part of a broader range of outreach activities, which include things like workshops and preservations at conferences. Now, obviously, with the current global health situation, conferences and workshops are very thin on the ground. But as soon as they resume, so will we. We've also got a LinkedIn group, which you can see on screen now, and also a Twitter handle. So if you haven't done so already, please sign up to the social media. Next slide, please. So finally, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Bjorn Skog and Andreas Segerberg from ES Solutions. Bjorn is the CEO and co-founder of ES Solutions and a senior consultant in strategic digital preservation. Andreas is a preservation strategist and a senior consultant in strategic digital preservation and software development at ES Solutions. Now, both Bjorn and Andreas have made considerable contributions to the various eArch projects, which underlie many of the technological developments in the eArchiving building block. So I'm really pleased to have them both here with us today to introduce us to ESSArch. Bjorn, over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. My name is Björn Skog, and I'm a project manager and a preservation strategist at ES Solutions, as Jamie mentioned. I will introduce to you very briefly the company ES Solution and in more detail our solution for long-term preservation, that's equal to ESSArch. My colleague Andreas, who will present himself later on, will give you a live demo of the software components in ESSArch. Though this presentation is something we do from time to time, but never before with such a fantastic global audience, we sincerely hope this will be of interest to you. We will use abbreviations, hopefully known to you, but if any buzzword is unused and you don't recognize, please comment on this. ES Solutions is a Swedish company located in Stockholm and Gothenburg. It was founded back in 2002, and we have since then been focused on eArchiving, information management, and digital long-term preservation. One of our first assignments was an analysis of the Swedish National Archives' present and future needs for archival storage. Since then, we have collaborated in many different aspects and challenges, and it has been and is a really interesting issue to work with closely to Swedish National Archive. ES Solutions started as a company providing services and consultancy, and over the years the company has evolved, and today we have 3 business areas. One is consultancy, another is science, and the third is ESSArch, which we will be focusing on during this webinar. As you can see, we have over the years balanced and combined consultancy with science, and our end-to-end solution for digital long-term preservation, named ESSArch. ESSArch was originally an output of collaborative ideas discussed with the Swedish National Archive. And after 3 years of evolving discussions and mutual development with them, we together in 2009 finally had ESSArch up and running in production at 3 geographically separated locations within the organization of the Swedish National Archive. Since then, we have improved and added more features to ESSArch by refinement and further requirements from several organizations like the National Archive of Norway, KDRS, Sydarkivera, and recently the Church of Sweden. As consultants and project manager, we also managed e-archiving projects on a Swedish national level. And on behalf of the National Archive of Norway, we in 2013 were invited to participate in an upcoming project we addressed as eArch. And now, with a couple of years of hard work behind us, we finally can see some good results from the eArch family project, and there is more ahead of us. ESSArch has also improved through the eArch family project, but not the project only itself, but also through other clients' requirements. So let us put focus on the topic for today's webinar. ESSArch is an end-to-end solution for digital long-term preservation and covers the complete archival workflow. It addresses e-archiving capabilities to individuals, organizations, and systems. And of course, ESSArch is based on OIAS and PIMAS and extended with functionalities to support pre-ingest and management of archival collections, just to mention some of the extended functionality. ESSArch can be used as a pre-archive or as an archive specifically for long-term preservation. Any kind of organization can benefit from this solution. If you're in the public sector or the private sector, if you're a national archive, library, or museum, you can still benefit from ESSArch. And we do have support for submission agreements, different kind of workflows, different kind of validators and converters, management of the archive and its collections, and the solution is trustworthy since it is implemented into environments totally separated from internet and external networks. This means it operates in a dedicated networking environment with high security requirements and complex authorization mechanisms. And if you need to secure connectivity to ESSArch, it has a REST API, a well-known interface, and it's really easy to use. ESSArch is being continuously developed with a basis of Python, and the roadmap is also developed continuously with a high priority of development issues where sponsorship exists. And ESSArch is truly an open source solution that enables you to start directly with your archival workflow and digital preservation and let you grow with the solution as you need changes. And ESSArch has native support for specifications from eArch, Sweden and Norway. As we all know, specifications changes over time. They are adjusted, evolved, and sometimes merged with others or in fact replaced. Even though it would be great to see one version of a specification to last more than decades, we might and perhaps should expect more frequent changes. This requires some sort of version or generation management, and our solution for specification version management are profiles. They are simply templates of specifications that enables version management. They also simplifies the preparation of metadata in order to reduce the number of clicks in the graphical user interface as much as possible. Profiles should not be mistaken for generation management of IPs, where we use AICs for that purpose, as they've been doing at the National Archive of Norway the last 7 years. After all, the use of specifications aims to facilitate and simplify exchange and preservation of content. I won't go through this diagram, don't worry, but this is presented to you to understand that we understand that a technical solution is just one piece of the information management puzzle. The technical solutions are important. It is supposed to be efficient and create different benefits. However, there are much more to be prepared for, and there might be obvious challenges and some not as clear to everybody. But based on our experience, organizations are not equally prepared for digital long-term preservation. Their maturity differs. So what we always want to do is to early in the phases of an implementation, define and specify the life cycle perspectives and workflows, just in order to simplify the upcoming configuration and adaptation. So this map is really good to start with in order to achieve a common ground of understanding who will do what, when, and in what way, etc. And most important, the life cycle perspectives of information will open up discussions about responsibilities and ownership. Just to give you a quick overview of the capacity of ESSArch. These are the figures from the Swedish National Archives on the 25th of March this year. They've had ESSArch in production now for almost 11 years, and so far they managed to ingest and preserve this amount of data. As you can see, it turns out that most of the archival collections are small AIPs, less than 10 gigabytes and 1,000 files. But since they continuously receive and ingest content into the archive, this will of course grow. So finally, I would like to round up my brief introduction to ES Solutions and ESSArch and point out that we as a company has 17 years of experience knowledge and competence within eArchiving, information management, and digital long-term preservation. Our clients appreciate this. It simplifies a lot and makes it easier to move forward. Therefore, we are assigned over time as consultants for different kind of assignments, as you can see. And we truly believe it's important with sharing competence and expertise. And that's the reason why we really like the challenges the science area can provide, not to mention the eArch family projects. I will now end this theoretical presentation and let my colleague Andreas continue with a live demo of ESSArch and its functionality. So I will hand over to you, Andreas, so that you can continue. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Björn. Yes, my name is Andreas Segerberg and I am a Senior Preservation Strategist at ES Solutions. Besides from working at ES Solutions, I also work at the University of Gothenburg, where I teach digital preservation and archival theory. I will be the one who gonna walk you through the ESSArch preservation system. And in this first section, we're going to focus on the pre-ingest function and the ingest function. We have prepared some basic data, simple office documents, and we're also going to see a little bit about the functionality that we can do with CEF database preservation format. So I will switch over to my browser. Before we get into the producer and ingest functions, I want to talk a little bit about the menu and the interface of ESSArch. So we have a top-level menu section which represents the different types of functions that we have in ESSArch, so for producers, ingest, access, and so forth. If we click on something, we will have a sub-menu with different like steps in the process of ingesting or working with archival content. Yes, we will look further into that in a little bit. I would like to talk a little bit about groups, users, and roles and permissions. And for that, we're going to take a quick peek in the ESSArch administration site. So from this site, you can do all kinds of tweaking and setting of the systems. For instance, you can add your own list of values. You can set up the system just the way you would like it to work. So under this section, authentication and authorization, is where we can manage groups and users and roles and permissions. Right now, if we would just check on permissions, we can see that we at the moment have 562 different kinds of permissions that can be set on either users or groups or roles, and so they are basically configured that you can either do something or you can't, you can update or you can delete. It's those kind of rules, or if you actually can see anything. So we'll go back and I think we could look at groups. So groups. In this installation and this demo site, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. We have a default group and we have the historical archives of the European Union, and I also prepared with Department X and Division Y. As you can see, if we go into Division Y, we can set that this Division Y group has a parent. The parent is Department X. And what this means is if you have requirements that Department X, for instance, in this case, would see the contents of Division Y, while Division Y would not see anything from Department X. If you would have siblings on the same level as Division Y, those siblings wouldn't see any content from each other. So that's one way of working with groups, that they can have hierarchy within themselves. You can further subdivide this if you would like. You can have divisions under this division, so to speak. So it could be very, very fine tailored. If we look on users, I will go into the user Björn. Here we can see that we can set permissions on the user level. Right now we don't use that, so permissions are given to a role instead, and then the role would be applied to a user within a specific group. So right now we can see that Björn is only part of Division Y. I can add that Björn should be part of this group, the Historical Archives of the European Union, as well. I will save and continue. And if we scroll down here, we can see that now we have access to assign roles. So in Division Y, Björn has all the roles that are available in the system. For the Historical Archives of the European Union, we're going to do something different. We would say that he should only be archivist, which means that he will only have access to the archival description functionality of ESSArch. So let's save this. Yes, save. And I'm going go back to the main site, and let's log out and log in as Björn. So he was part of Division Y, and where he was more or less an administrator. He could do pretty much anything with the system. He can produce, ingest, access, and so forth. Let's take a look on the group that we just recently assigned him to the Historical Archives. And you will see now that he only, based on roles, only have access to the archival description functionality of ESSArch within this group. So he has different roles in this group. So you can set up the system that you can have one instance of ESSArch where you can let different types of user maybe only use the producer functionality, and some maybe should only have access to archival descriptions. This is useful when you have ESSArch in one instance. There is, of course, a possibility to use and install many instances of ESSArch that can communicate with one another. So you can have multiple instances that only utilizes the producer functionality and then sends the information packages into a receiving archive. So I will. We can also check that the hierarchy of the groups, and we can do this by looking at some authority records. I've just set up one authority record here, the fonts and the fonts of Division Y. So Björn is part of Division Y, while he's not part of Department X. And Department X is the parent of Division Y, so he won't have access to the parent organization or group. If I log out and log in as the user Andreas, whom I know is part of Department X. As you can see, I'm not a part of Division Y, but I'm still going to have access to the content, to the archival descriptions. If I go to the authority records, I will have access to authority records from Department X and from Division Y, even though I'm not part of that organization. So that's one way of working with this. So I'm going to log out and log in again, and I'm going to use a system administration account just to be a little bit more efficient when I demonstrate this. So we're going to start off now with the producer role. And as I mentioned before, this could be used standalone. Maybe you only want to have this producing tool, and that's fine. So in this subsection, the first thing we're going to do is that we are going to prepare an IP. And I will click this button and I can give it a label, and let's call it Office Documents. And there we have it. If I click this, the first thing I'm going to need to do is to assign a submission agreement to this. At the moment, we have 3 different kinds of submission agreements. You can have many more. You could have hundreds if you like. It a little bit depends on how you work with submission agreements. You can work on a very general level, or you can work on an extremely specific level if you like. So for this demonstration, we have like the eArch specifications, and we have installed the Swedish alike. But we're going to use the eArch specifications for zip. A submission agreement is built up by a number of profiles. So, but you only have access to the profiles that are relevant at that particular step. So, for instance, you won't have the AIP profile available when you create the zip because it's not really meaningful. And even if you could have it, I don't think it would be a good idea, because you probably don't want the producer to be able to define how the AIP should be described with metadata. We have transfer project. This is a profile where we can do some settings. You can choose what kind of container format that we want to use for the transfer, either TOR or zip. We can choose if it should be compressed. What kind of checksum algorithms are we going to use? Are we going to notify the preservation organization by email that they have received something that they need to action upon? We can specify the receiver URL or a transfer destination, which are a little bit the same, but kind of different. This is when you want to send it from one instance of ESSArch to a completely different instance, and transfer is when you want to transfer from another step within ESSArch. For instance, if you have a specific instance where you want to quarantine certain IPs, that's where you provide that setting. We have submit description, which is kind of like an envelope kind of sticker on the zip, where we could just tell some basic information about the preservation organization and who is submitting it. The zip profile, here we have a ton of fields that could be filled in. This is just filled in with dummy values at the moment. If this would be a production environment, this will be, of course, filled in with actual values from the organization that is providing or transferring the zip. As you can see, some of these fields are non-editable, and some fields are that you can edit, and other fields have drop downs with predefined values that you can choose from. All of this is, of course, it's possible to tailor this to suit your needs. So now I'm showing all the fields that that we have, but you can exclude some if you don't like them. You can set that this is a field that it's not going to be able to edit. For instance, that the preservation organization is one of those that you probably know who is the preservation organization, and identify codes and stuff like that, and even the content, like the category. You're probably going to have a specific submission agreement that handles databases or maybe websites or whatever it's. So you probably gonna not have it as open as I have it right here. We also have some fields for filling in preservation metadata, which is some information about the agents that's gonna be used when generating premise XML. So when I'm feeling done with this, I just press the prepare button. So, and now the IP that we had in the prepare state has now moved to the collect content state. So we have it here, Office documents. And what the previous prepare step did, it was that it prepared and generated the basic folder structure for the IP. I won't go through the CSIP or the specification in this demonstration. There is a previous webinar on that. But I'm going to show you some different ways of providing the content that's going to be archived. So I'm going to choose the folder where I want to upload my content, because this scenario that I'm showing right now is like collect Office documents. We have other kinds of ways of getting the information into the system that could be totally automatic, that you can communicate with an external system that delivers from exports, and we can integrate with the other kinds of workflow engines, BizTalk, and so forth. In this case, we want to be in the data folder. So I can now choose some files. I have prepared some sample content. I can either drag and drop files and upload them like that. I can also choose files I can choose folders, whole folders. See, outreach folder. Can upload that one. And there you have it. This is one way of uploading content through the web interface, but it's also possible to transfer from other transfer methods. For example, you could have a shared folder via Samba or something like that. I'm going to show you now how you can use a regular FTP client. So I'm let's see, and I need to update this. And here we have the information package that we are currently preparing. And as you can see, I have access to the same folder here. So I could go here and go back here. And let's see, take the reports folder and just drop it, and it will upload through secure FTP. And if I just refresh here, our reports folder will show up in the user interface. So with all the files. Right. So when I'm done collecting my content, in this case Office documents, but that could be also like exports from systems like economics or ERMS or just about anything. I will say that I'm finished. So the next step is to actually create the zip, because in previous step we just prepared the IP, we prepared the folder structure, we prepared the metadata that's going to be used when creating the zip. One can wonder why we didn't just create the zip from the collect content subsection and just submit it right away. That's because we believe that different organizations have different workflows and different needs. Some want to collect the content, create the zip, and do everything automatically, which is absolutely a possibility to do that through the work engine of ESSArch. But we want to have permissions on these different types of states, since it's not entirely sure that the same person will do every step. You can have different people who do different types of have responsibility for different types in the flow, so to speak. So now we're going to create our submission information package, and for this I'm going to use this setting. I want to convert the files. This workflow is set up to take any, I've set it up to convert Office documents to PDF-A documents. All documents, Excel and DocX, but I've excluded PowerPoints. I don't want them to be converted to PDF, just for demonstration purposes, of course. So this, which way we're going to convert and what tools we're going to use for converting in this creation section of the system is defined in the workflow and in profiles. And essentially, it's a part of the submission agreement where you agree upon when and how you're going to do conversions or transformation of information. You could have a submission agreement that says that the file should be converted before submitted to the archive, which is very common in Sweden. That you have those kind of regulation that the content that's going to be ingested or delivered to an archive should be archive ready, so to speak. So let's create our submission information package. While it's creating, we can have a quick look on the tasks. We have access to tasks. Actually, we have had process tasks in the previous sections as well. But we can see all the steps that are defined through the workflow and how they are progressing. So right now we are on the step creating the zip, and oops, there it was done. And you can see, for instance, we have validation steps that are defined. We can see the diff check, for instance, and we can have a detailed view of this and see that we have success. And we can see all the diff checks that were made. We can search for specific messages. So, and now our submission information package is ready for submitting. In this, as mentioned before, we have access to all the tasks and all the events, and we can also browse our content. So tasks and events. Events are premise events. Basically, these are the events that we want to save for in premise. So they are part of the preservation description information that we need to proper preserve our content. So I will choose to submit this. And now it will be submitted within the same instance of ESSArch, since I'm only demonstrating on one instance, but it could be transferred to a totally different offsite instance of ESSArch if you have the system set up in that way. So now it has been received in the reception, and we have our office documents here, and here is probably an archivist at the preservation organization that's going to maybe do some auditing on this. Maybe you want to check things, see that all the events that are required has been successfully validated and so forth. You can, as an archivist, add your own events, premise events. So we have this is a list of every event available in the system, but we could maybe see if I have any relevant ones. Maybe that I'm approving or something, and I can add this, say success. It looks good. And it will be added. I will now receive, so I will move this from the reception to the approval stage. And I will now have three options. I could either get it, and then it will end up in my workspace. I can get it as a new generation, and I would also put it in the workspace, my personal workspace. right now I have some things here, but we could move something into the to the workspace a little bit later. So in the approval, if you want to get it to to a workspace, that could be maybe if you want to run some auditing or tools that you only have access to outside of the system that you want to use. That's fine. That's why you can move it to the workspace and work with it there, do additional checks or whatever requirements you have. Get is that you're getting it as a read-only. When you get it as a new generation, it will be locked for further processing until you are finished working with it in the workspace. And from the workspace, you could also choose to preserve it as a new generation, or a version, if so like. So then you would have maybe you want to preserve the version 0, or maybe you want to take it to the workspace, do some controls, maybe do some transformations, and then preserve it as a new version of the same package, and then preserve it. But for now, we are going to just preserve it. You can set an appraisal date, or you can you can also make a comment on the approval. But now I will just submit and preserve. And from here, I can also make, I can edit the profiles of the AIP and AIP description, and also the preservation metadata. But I'm just going to leave it from here. Here you can choose if you want to index the files for full text index, or more specific index if you have a specific content type that you want to index in a certain way. Here you can choose if you want to index it or not. We're going to leave that to yes. We also have options if you want to allow unknown file types. If your submission agreement says that we only accept PDFA, and you somehow get a different type of file into that, maybe you want to do some bit preservation on that, even though it wasn't a part of the submission agreement. So you have the option to allow unknown file types. And the same thing for encrypted files. If we find encrypted content, which could be quite difficult, but we manage to identify some file types that are protected, password protected, and so forth. And if you want to allow them to be ingested to the preservation, to the archive, or not. So let's just preserve this. And while it's preserving, I think we have covered the producer and the ingest function of ESSArch. And we're going to go and talk a bit about the archival description or archival collection management system of ESSArch. We follow and adhere to the ISA standards ESSArch, ESSArch and ESDF. And we have functionality for managing accessions, locations, classification, and preservation planning of archival holdings. I've, as you might have noticed, prepared the system and populated with some authority records and some archival description examples from the historical archives of the European Union. And in this next section, I will demonstrate the overall functionality of EIAS, which is ESSArch Archival Information System, which could be used completely standalone. Yes, Before we move into the archival description, I just want to show you the information package that we just ingested and approved for preservation. So here we have our Office documents AIP, which we can just browse it. If you remembered, we did some conversions and transformations of the files. I said that I wanted to convert every Office document except for PowerPoints to be PDFs. So here we had doc files before, and we have the reports, and we have the outreach, which were only PowerPoint presentation, which you can see. We can also do like that, and you can see that the PowerPoint presentations were not converted because I told them not to be converted, but I specified in my workflow profile that the other ones should be converted to PDFs. So let's see. I can show you have access to them like that as well. We're going to look closer on the access functionality a little bit later. But now let's move on to archival descriptions. So ESSArch adheres to the ISA standards. If you're curious how we implement those standards, you can check our documentation, where we have a crosswalk table for the sections of, for instance, ESSA, and how it's implemented in ESSArch. But that was just a side note. So let's start off with looking at some authority records. So here's a list of a number of authority records. You can check, for instance, for the European Space Agency. You can press edit. You can see we have some basic data, like the start date and end date of the corporate body. We have some options here that you probably are familiar with if you have worked with archival descriptions before. So like record status, reference codes, when was the actual record created, and so forth. We have subsections where we have history or biography. We can have notes and also topography. So if we just check for history, we can have a brief biography of the ESA. It's possible to add custom identifiers to authority records. So, and we can add as many as we would like, and all the types that were used here can be customized. So, for instance, if we want to add that number and use as an identifier, that's perfectly fine. And we can use another NID, which is the National Archive in Sweden's identifier system. Can add another one. Names, yes. An authority record needs to have an authorized name, so that's something that is required to add when we create a new authority record. We could choose from different types here, non-European organization, and here you can see that the the authorized name is something that needs to be filled in when you prepare or start up with a new authority record. But from there, you can add more names. So, for instance, we could have an abbreviation of this, which is ESA. You can have a period of validity for this particular name and say it was valid from 1960 or something, and say it's still valid. And you can add a description, and you can say if you're sure, and you can add it like this. And you can have as many name forms as you like. Mandates are reference to records that is used to describe why is this corporate body, why does it exist. So this is just a section of referencing to those kinds of records to better understand why the corporate body or other entity types are described and why they exist. So we can make a relation between authority records. So I could, for instance, say that one authority record, say William Owen Locke, we could say that he was maybe associated with the ESA, and we can specify during what periods was he associated with this other authority record. So now we have a relation between ESA and William Owen Locke. So if I click on this, I will end up to another different authority record where we could see William Owen Locke, and we can read some of his history. And the final section on the authority record is the related resources, which could be either fonts, collections, series, even files, items. You can relate to pretty much anything that you want. So in this case, we have a related resources of the European Space Agency fonts, which the authority record is the creator of that font. But we can add another one. We can say that we want to have a relation to the European Free Trade Association fonts. And we can say that someone is a contributor to that. And maybe they contributed to a specific series or a collection. That's possible to document it like this. And we can add another one. We can say division Y, and we can say that the type is that they are custodians of the division Y fonts. All these relations are mirrored. So if we see, for instance, take creator, we will say that the creator is. And the same thing goes for relations between different authority records. So now we're in the detailed view of the fonts, and we can browse the tree structure of that font, and we can access documents, or either by clicking on it in the tree structure or by looking at, okay, the A01 console has some contents, which is here, image, and I can click on it, and I will have the image showed. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about structures. Structures are templates that could be used when you create a new resource. So you could create filing plans, business classification schemes, and pretty much any kind of structure that you can come up with. So I have a few examples here. Here we have sort of a filing plan. Also, we have the Swedish Allmänna arkivschema, which is also a filing plan, which has a fixed structure. Here's an example of a business classification. I can create new structures, and the types, as any other type in ESSArch, are fully customizable. So you can define your own names for these, and you can define which nodes that you are going to be able to use within this. For a filing plan, you probably want to have like series, sub-series, files, items. In a business classification, you would probably want to have like function, activities, transactions, and so forth. So if I just create one that's called test, I will have an empty structure, and I can add new structured units. So for a business classification, we have functions, activities, sub-activities, and yeah, these are the ones that I just added through the administration interface, and you could of course add more. And that function can have activities. We can apply rules to these that, for instance, you don't want instances of this template that you shouldn't be able to move. For instance, that you can move stuff like this. We could can prohibit that so you're not able to rename, you're not able to have sub sections of a specific part of the structure, and so forth. We can then publish this, and if I publish it, it's going to be available system-wide for use as a template for new resources. So I can publish it like that. And once it's published, it also has a version control. So if maybe one function is replaced with another function, you can create a new version of the classification and make those arrangements. And if we do unpublish it, it stops being available in the system, and you can publish the new version to be used. So this is a very good way to have control of the records creation. So ESSArch also has functionality for location management, which is basically the the management of physical archives. So here you can model your your building, archival building with rooms, with floors, rooms, shelves, shelf sections, and yeah, you can go how deep as you like. And if I can add a new, we can say that this is shelf 1. We can say that something has a capacity for, say, it's 10 meters of shelving. And we can also set a function of the location, if it's permanent or just a temporary location, like that. If we go and go to division by fonts, or we can go to this fonts, and we have, if we add a node to this, say that we want to have a box, so this would be a representation of a physical box that you have with papers. I could link this to a location. I say I want to put this on shelf 1. Now we have registered a location for the box 112, and it's located at shelf 1. So if I go into our location management, I can see that the box is from this fonts, and it is located at shelf 1. I can also move this or link to a new location. Say, for instance, I had a temporary location. Maybe we had to do some preservation actions on this conservation or something like that. We can move it to a temporary location, or we could move it around if you have that kind of needs. So let's just move it to the parent. So now it's on the floor in the room, maybe, hopefully not. And the final section of ESSArch is the accession management, or the deliveries management. You can use this in what I usually say in either a simple way, a semi-advanced way, or an advanced way. So I'm going to show you first the simple way, where we just start off with creating a delivery or an accession, if you are more comfortable of naming it accessions. So we can call it delivery of office documents. We can set a type. For now, I'm just using gift or a legal deposit. So let's choose a legal deposit. We can choose who is the producer organization. Say it's the European Space Agency again. We can tie this to a submission agreement. So basically, we have the functionality to actually handle both digital and physical analog records within the same system. This can be useful if you have mixed content, which I will show you a little bit later. So now I'm just going to create this. You can also have a reference code if you have reference to this delivery in an external system, for maybe a case management system where you want to make a reference. We can create it. So now we have it, our delivery of office documents accession registered. So this follows the same ID of events in ESSArch for example, for IPs. So we use premise events for accessions. So the first event that is created automatically is the registration of the accession that we created the post in the database. So from here, this is the simple way just to have it like an event log. So we can add new events. So we can say that we received something. I could say that we checked it, and so forth. And that's how you could, the really simple way of handling accessions. I will remove the two first ones, and I will show you how you can use transfers. So this is useful if a delivery or an accession is made up of separate transfers. For instance, if you have mixed content, that maybe the registrar is digital, or the case management system is digital, the ERMS maybe, but some records are still on paper, maybe because of legal issues, or maybe because there are legacy systems that just were holding the records and not the physical papers. So we can add a new transfer. We can call this transfer of and we can have basic information of who is the submitter, because maybe it's an entirely different organization that is actually submitting the content, which is not doesn't need to be the same organization that actually produced the records. So I'm going to leave this empty for now. From this transfer section, I can now add events to that transfer. So I can say that we received the analog records. I can say that I checked them. I can say that I approved them. Now I can add another transfer. And this transfer can have its own set of events. So I can receive, I can check, I could say that I actually registered it in the archival information system. And if we go back to our events table, we can now see that it's divided in different transfers, but you have a complete overview of the whole accession. So I think that wraps it up for this section, and we will move forward to the next slide, where we're going to talk more about access and services, how we could provide access to content. So search and retrieval and tip generation. So let's have a look at how you can search and retrieve records and information from ESSArch. So in front of us we have our search window. So here I could just search for a term. For instance, I could start typing something. I will get a hit on here, final report. Final report. I can also search within full text index documents. I have a term there. I know I'm going to get a hit. So this documents provide a basis for understanding is something that is within the text of these documents, my test documents. They are the same documents. That's why I get 3 of them. I can also narrow my search with filters and facets. So if I wanted to retrieve something, a specific type of something, let's say I only want to search for series. Let's see if I have some filter ongoing here. Maybe I should just go back and forth. I only want to search for series. Then this search results will only show me series, and I could further narrow it down, say that I only want to have series from division Y, and it will only give me the series from division Y fonts. I can also apply filters, say I only want to search for PDF files, and of course I can combine it with only PDF files from, let's say, Department X fonts. And if I want to access something here, I just click on the search result and I can view. The other way to access records is through navigating and searching from the archival description. So you can click around and see that I'm interested in relationships with departments, and here annual statistics return, and you can see that I have 3 records, and I can view it like that. Deep generation. From the access functionality, we have something called dissemination. This is where you prepare disseminations if you want to get the information, so to speak, out of ESSArch, or if you want to give it to a researcher or a different OIS or any other type of scenario when you need to disseminate the information. So let's call this my dip and prepare it. And it follows the same procedure and logic as we did when we prepared a zip. So it's basically the same workflow, and you can apply your own workflows as well. For instance, if you have in your archive high resolution TIFF images, and then you can have a workflow that automatically converts those to maybe JPEGs or some other formats that are more suitable consumer format. This could be maybe a little misinterpreted, that it's called submission agreement, but actually you can specify through the submission agreement how the information should be disseminated. So just for the case of purpose, for demonstration, I'm going to use a different submission agreement. I'm not going to use the eArch. I'm going to use as input to create my dissemination package. I'm going to use the package that we created with the eArch specification, but just to demonstrate that it's possible to disseminate in an entirely different format, we're going to use the Swedish specifications. So I'm going to lock this and click Prepare. And now we have created our dissemination, which is the bottom part. In order to add content to the dissemination package, we first need to move some information packages to our workspace. As I can see right now, I already have 2 packages currently in my workspace. So before I do anything else, I'm going to remove those from my personal workspace. And now we should go to our previous created Office documents AIP following the eArch specifications. And I will now get this package and so retrieve it into my workspace. So click Get. And now it will retrieve it. And here we have it, our Office documents in the workspace. And I have access to the file browser as usually here in the workspace. If we then go back to the access and go to dissemination and go to our prepared dissemination, which is called MyDip. As you can see here, I already prepared something called MyDip, so I will remove that. So we just have the one that we're actually preparing. So now we have the, as you can see, the eArch specification with its submission folder and representations and the data. And say I wanted to hand out all the reports from this IP into a Swedish dissemination package, which is a bit quite similar, but not as sophisticated as the eArch specification. I just add this to my content folder for the dip, and I have validator choices, and I can do all the things that I can do when I prepare a zip, I can also do when I prepare a dissemination. So I will create this dissemination. And it will create our dip. And now it's created. Right now, my system is only set up to have the ability to download the dissemination. But as you could see, the tab is called Preserve, where you can have more actions. Actually, we could move this dissemination package back to the ingest reception. So then we would have a closed ecosystem where we could do stuff to our IPs, and we could ingest them in the normal flow to sort of say re-ingest them into the archival system again. But here I only have the option to download. So I'll submit and I'll download, and I will get a download link for the tar package. I can save it. So in this next section, we are going to have a look at reporting, statistics, and monitoring of ESSArch. We're also going to have a quick look at the REST API. So from the user interface, we have some basic reporting functionality where we could create print reports of appraisals, information packages, roles, the total size of the archives, users, and this one that is obviously not translated, which says archival descriptions, arkivredovisning in Swedish. So we can tick the ones that we would like to have a report on, and we can generate the report and just get a summary of like the total object size and how many permissions you have in the system and how many information packages. Obviously, this is a very basic report. We do customize these reports in the needs of our customers. One other type of reports is that you could export the results from a search. So say that we want to have all the series from Department X fonts. I could export these results to either a PDF for print or CSV for further manipulating in some other system for statistics or whatever. Often our customers have their own monitoring systems and reporting systems that they use. We do support and give support for integration with Kibana, with ESSArch. I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of Kibana. So here I have created a very small dashboard where we can see that I have gathered information from our index. So you can basically do any type of report as long as you have indexed the content or the material or the information in the database. So we can see that we have 7 authority records. I have a small counter here that we have 97 series and 23 documents. The pie chart below is just an report on the distribution of MIME types within the archive. So we have 34% of XML files, and we have some PDF files, and we can also change color of this if you like, and so on. So we can basically build very advanced types of reporting based on the information that we store in Elasticsearch with the help of Kibana. I'm going to show you a different type of reporting, which is more of a system overview. So here we have some reports of the usage of this system, which I set up, which is the logs from ESSArch, where we can monitor stuff. So I made one time series here of logins, so we can see that we have a time series of logins. We have failures and we have successful logins. I have one dash here of just general user activity, like when is people using the system. This can be very useful to have a look at. For instance, if we have a peak of usage during midnight on Sundays, maybe we should be alerted that something isn't quite right. And the same goes for if we have like 1,000 of failed authentications, maybe we should have a look into that. And as of now, I'm filtering of all the logins and all the user activities as of today. I could easily just change this and say I want to look from the last 7 days, for instance. And now we have a different distribution, and we can see that if we exclude the successful ones, I can see that we had some logging failures. We had 5, which is probably nothing to be alarmed about, but if we were having like a huge amount of authentication failures, maybe we should check the logs more in detail. So for instance, here we have a user login failed, and we could check that the username Björn has tried to log in. Since I know the username Björn, probably he just misspelled or something, so I could leave it for that. So in the following section, we are going to focus on the configuration of ESSArch, and we're also going to have a look on the administrative task that can be performed, which includes preservation actions. We are first going to click on the cog to get into the administration site of ESSArch. Here we can define our own types, list of values, and so forth. For instance, we can add our own event types. Here you have the list of all the premise events that are available from a default installation of ESSArch. But if you want to add your own event types, that is entirely possible. Just add them by giving them a type, and a detail, and a category. We have been talking about profiles and submission agreements and the customization of the front end of ESSArch when we looked at the prepare IP and the zip creation process. Just to give you an idea of how this configuration is done, I'm going to show you some JSON files that we use for defining the workflow and forms. So the first one that we're looking on right now is the default workflow definition of the eArch ingest flow. So what you can see, we can define different steps and tasks. So the first one that says, if we have an error, we are going to create a receipt that says that the job failed. If we scroll down a bit, we can see that we have other types of tasks that are invoked by ESSArch. And all of these are functions that are available from ESSArch. So we have a task that generates premise, we have a task that generates mets, we can update the IP status, and so on. Here is another type of profile, which is the form profile. Here we can see we have a key that says it's the IP archivist organization, and from this we could customize labels. It says Archival Creator Organization, but this could of course be customized to your own native language, or if you want to that it should say something entirely different. Then we have template options. We can say if a field is required or if it's disabled, which equals to then it's not possible to enter any information. And we can say what type of field it is. In this case, it's an input file. I will scroll down and we can check another definition. Here we have a template option that says it's required, but it's not disabled. It has a label, and then it has a bunch of options. And this will render a drop-down list because the type is select. Let's go back to our user interface, and we're going to have a look on the archive maintenance function of ESSArch. First, we have the appraisal section, which maybe should be called disposal or destruction. But anyhow, let's have a look on how to destroy records in ESSArch. We have the option to create templates which could be used to as templates for jobs. For this demonstration, I'm going straight to creating jobs. So I can give this appraisal job a name. For instance, we can call it destroy PDFs. I need to give it a purpose or a reason. Why am I doing this? This could be either a reference to a disposal or retention authority, maybe some other reason. That's entirely up to the organization who implements this, but that's the thought of it. We can define a date where this job will execute. I will not set a date because then we have to sit and wait for that date, and so we are going to run this job manually. We have the option to remove the whole information package, or we can specify disposal authority 1, 2, 3, or we can choose specific paths that should be removed. That could be certain folders within IPs. It could be globs of patterns to specific MIME types or stuff like that. So if we would like to delete all log files, we would create a pattern of ***/***log that says every log file in every folder. And I could add this path, and I could choose from on which information package this specific job should be executed on. I will not do this now because I'm going to show you a different way of choosing the files that need to be destroyed. So I'm going to remove this, but I'm going to just create the job. So the job is created and it's in a pending state. We can, from the archival description and our search functionality, filter out records that are going to be destroyed. We have a column here called appraisal, and we can set dates on different documents that says this is going to be destroyed on this or that date. And then we can use this information to filter out a range of a date range where certain documents fall in under, so we know which documents we are going to destroy. But we also have access to all the search functionality in ESSArch to filter out records that should be added to jobs. So for instance, we could say PDFs, and I want to destroy the PDFs of department, maybe not, the PDFs of division Y fonts, like that. And then I can add this to this job, and it shows it here, and it will show up here, and I will add them. If I go back to the archive maintenance and have a look on the job that we created, and we just added some files from the search, I can click run, and I can do a preview, and I can see that we have a bunch of PDFs that are a part of this job and are going to be destroyed if we do run this job. I will not run this job now. instead I will show you the format conversion section of ESSArch, which is very similar to the appraisal section. So we have the same option of creating templates, and that can be used for making instances of jobs. But for this demo, I'm also going to just create a job. Let's say we are going to convert ESSArch to SQLite. And the purpose is maybe for dip. We can also schedule this job if we like to, so it runs on a certain date, maybe on night time. I'm going to add a path. And here I can choose from different types of tools. The one relevant here is the CEF to SQLite conversion tool that comes with ESSArch. And I will add this. And then I can apply this to a specific IP. This is one way of choosing it from this list. I can do it the other way around, which I will show you right now. I will just create this conversion job so we have it in the database. So if I go to Access, I could, let's see if we have this one. I can right click and I can choose conversion. I was a bit quick there. As you can see, we can also do the appraisal jobs from right clicking an information package. From this section, we can also change the organization, the ownership of the IP, and we also can show some information of the package. For instance, the storage. This particular package is actually stored on 3 locations: default long-term storage disk, a cache disk, and just a storage disk. So same IP on 3 different locations. But we are going to add this to the conversion job that we created, the CEF to SQLite one, and we will add it. And if we go back to the maintenance and format conversions, we can click Run, and we do a preview, and we can see that we have a sample CEF database archive file that it's going to be affected by this conversion job. So I will close this and I will choose to run this job. This job is now in the ongoing section, and it takes a little while for it to run, because since you saw we had our information package was distributed on 3 different storage devices, and we need to, in this setting, I'm choosing to create a new package from that one. But if this was a destruction job, we would have to actually destroy the records of all the versions from all the storage devices, which can take a while. So now it was finished, and we could see a report of the conversion job. So if I just click here, I'm going to have a conversion report, and the purpose was dip creation maybe. And I can see that this file was affected from this IP, and the tool used was the CEF to SQLite, and some dates for when it was started and was ended. So if we now take a look under the Access, you can see that the statistic database here has a plus sign, because we just created a new generation or new version of the package. So we didn't destroy the archived CEArch file, it's still in the generation 0 package. But we generated a new version 1, and if we browse this new package here, we can see that we have created a new representation of the CEArch in a SQLite format, which is quite nifty for browsing and exploring data. So if I double click this one, I could get the option to open it, and I can access the database data. So I can browse, you can see, stuff like that. A note on the tools that we use in ESSArch. These can be configured through the archival administration site, and under the section, let's see, conversion tools. So here I have a bunch of conversion tools that we ship with ESSArch. We have Uniconv for converting Office documents to PDFA. We can convert certificate files with OpenSSL. We have, this is a very Swedish format for economics. We can do image transformation. I haven't added FFmpeg and stuff like that, but it's very easy to add your own conversion tools. Commercial or open source, it doesn't matter, as long as you can call them either by command line or if you have them in a Docker container. So to add a conversion tool, you could just give it a name, my conversion tool, and you can say either it's an application, which could be either a application or a Python script, or it could be a Docker image that you start and then stop when the conversion is done. You can say if it's enabled or not, and then you will give a path for the tool. So maybe it would make more sense to actually see maybe the ImageMagick one. So the path or the command is convert, and then we have the command, and these are variables that we can use, like the input file and the input directory and the input name and output. That's the command. And we can also have customized forms that we can use. So for this ImageMagick conversion tool, I added a form that you get options that you can convert to CAL, CP2, or JPEG, or TIFF. In the final section, I'm going to talk a bit about production environment and training environments. ESSArch is available as Linux and Windows distributions. ESSArch uses an object relational mapper, which means that you can use pretty much any database backend that you would like. However, we develop and test against MariaDB, Postgres, and SQL Server. ESSArch can be downloaded freely from GitHub. There is two repositories, one that is for the eArch, which is a fork of the eSolution ESSArch repository. If you like to have the bleeding edge of the code for ESSArch, it's recommended that you use the eSolution repository. However, we do make updates to the eArch repository as the project moves along. For training and educational purposes and for testing and actually for developing, we also offer a Docker version of ESSArch, which is really easy to set up if you know Docker. So I think this wraps it up for me, and I would like to thank all of you that have been participating in this session. And questions can be mailed to CF Building Blocks, and we will try to answer them as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.